The snow had been falling since before light when Nora Aldous gave up trying to lead a blind mule off the old Cavett grade and sat down in the drift beside him instead. The Ironwood colliery had not raised a ton of coal since 1962, and the narrow shelf of road that ran across the mountain's face to the sealed drift mouth had not carried anything heavier than a deer in 50 winters. And yet there in the middle of it, planted square on the frozen gravel where the road passed a blank rock cut, a 19-year-old Molly mule the colour of wet slate stood with her ears pinned forward and her nose pushed against the stone, exactly where she had stood at dawn the day before, and the 9 dawns before that. Juniper could not see the snow. She had gone blind in her left eye at 15 and lost the right one 2 winters later to the same slow cloud, and she still knew a wrong place the way an old miner knows bad air. By the draft on her whiskers and the give of the ground under her feet, and she had settled on that stretch of dead road, something that not one living soul in the hollow believed was there. Nora did not know it yet, but the rock she was leaning her long grey face against had been drilled and charged and then deliberately left unfired in the autumn of 1931 by a man the county had spent 94 years calling a coward. And before the winter was out, 6 people who had laughed at the 2 of them would swallow the laughing one mouthful at a time, and a 7th apology would arrive almost a century too late to do the man it belonged to any earthly good. 10 weeks before that 10th dawn, Nora had carried a milk crate of her own tools out of the Ironwood tipple garage for the last time, 23 years of service behind her, and a plant closure notice folded into the pocket of her coveralls. She was the last diesel mechanic the operation kept on, the one who nursed the loaders and the man-trip cars and the ancient hoist through every winter, and when the out-of-state owners finally sold the equipment for scrap, a man on a conference call she was patched into for 4 minutes thanked the whole shift for their commitment to safety and wished them the best. 23 years of busted knuckles had left her $19,000 and a work truck that was finally hers with the company decals scraped off, and driving home she passed the courthouse and saw the paper sign for the tax sale taped inside the glass door, and she pulled over mostly because home meant a trailer where her husband's chair still sat empty 2 years on and the phone never rang before 9. Lot 12 came up in the middle of the morning. Former Ironwood colliery watchman's cabin and the abandoned Cavett incline grade, 1 stone cabin and a half-mile of graded mountain road, and 4.1 acres of cut-over mountainside delinquent since the last taxpayer died. Sold as is, where is, all appurtenances and contents. The clerk read that last line the way a man reads a warranty he has never once been asked to honour. Dell Hoback bid on it for the standing timber. Dell ran the log yard down on the fork and had a laugh that carried the length of a courtroom, and he wanted the 4 acres for the poplar. Nora raised her paddle at 2,800. She could not have told the clerk why. 23 years she had kept dead iron alive, telling what was wrong inside a sealed engine by the sound it made turning over, and here was a cabin built to watch a mountain that had quit working, going for the price of a truck. Dell pushed her to 4,000, craning around to find her face. She took it at $4,100. Out on the courthouse steps he caught up to her, still grinning, and said, "You know what you just bought. Don't you, sweetheart? A leaky roof and a road to a hole in the ground they sealed shut in 62. Come Thor, you'll be paying me to haul it off, and I'd have done it today for the poplar." 2 men by the door laughed, and one of them told it at the tavern, and by Sunday it had made its way to her brother-in-law. Ray had been her husband's partner underground for 30 years and had earned the right to an opinion and never once withheld one. "You've got no job," he said. "You spent Alan's insurance money on a shack on a dead grade. It's a road to a sealed mine with a mountain hanging over it, and the snow's coming, and you'll be up there alone." "Not alone," Nora said. Ray looked at her a long moment. A blind old pit mule that can't see you wave her in, he said, is not company, Nora. That's just one more grave you'll be digging come spring. He meant it kindly, which was the cruelest way he could have found to mean it. The mule had come to Nora the same month as the closure. The soda place over the ridge had gone under in September, the last man in the county who still logged with animals selling off his team, and old Val Sauder stood in his barn lot at 81 holding a lead rope, with nowhere left to walk it. Nora had hauled hay off that mountain as a girl and had known Juniper as the surest-footed skid mule on that whole side of the county, and then as the old blind veteran who still walked a log road by memory and the feel of the grade, reading the mountain off her feet the way she once read it off her eyes. The bank wanted the soda lot cleared, and the sale barn would not take a blind mule, and everyone knew what that meant. So the old man folded the rope into Nora's hand, and the only thing he said to her came out sounding more like a warning than a blessing. "She won't leave a thing she's set on," Val said. "Don't you go teaching her to." Nora and Juniper moved up onto the Cavett grade the last week of October, which meant Nora parked her truck and a borrowed stock trailer in the flat by the cabin and started shoveling out what 6 decades of weather had left inside. Pack rats by the bushel. A rusted cot and a cast stove worth saving. A wall of shelving gone soft as bread. And in the deep back wall of the cabin, cut straight into the mountain itself, a course of squared and fitted stones so tight and so plumb that they did not match the rough, dry, laid rock around them, set by a hand that had cared a great deal more than a watchman's cabin ever called for. She scrubbed and rechinked and hung a stovepipe while October ran out, and the two of them slept in the trailer in the flat. Then, on a raw grey morning in the first days of November, in the black cold before the sun cleared the ridge, Juniper worked the trailer latch with her lip the way she'd learned on Verl's place, and Nora, half asleep, heard her go and did not rise. When she looked 10 minutes later, the mule was out on the grade, 100 yards along, standing square on the frozen road at the blank rock cut, ears hard forward, blind face pressed to the stone. Not grazing, not lost. Set the very posture Nora had watched for a dozen autumns on the Soda Mountain, the stance that meant a mule had found the one wrong thing on a road and would not be led past it, the whole animal narrowed down to a single point of stone. She called her, and Juniper did not turn, because she could not see the arm that waved, and it took Nora a moment every morning to remember that, and it cracked something in her chest every morning when she did. The mule held while the sky paled behind the ridge. She held through the shaken grain bucket she could smell, but not see, and the lead rope clipped and pulled, and, in the end, Nora hauling at her halter, at which point Juniper braced all 4 feet and became, for all Nora could move her, another part of the rock cut. When the sun finally cleared the ridge, the mule came off the spot on her own, blew once through her nose, and walked back down to the flat ahead of Nora, stiff and plainly satisfied with her morning's work. The next dawn it happened again. Same cut, same hour, same blindness, and the dawn after that. November spent money faster than it spent daylight. Roofing tin, stovepipe, chimney block, propane, chinking, and diesel for a truck that did nothing now but haul water and gravel up a mountain. She was carrying drinking water up in 7-gallon jugs because the cabin spring came out of the ground the colour of rust and tasted worse. By the 1st of December, the $19,000 was down to $5,200, and Nora had taken 3 shifts a week turning wrenches at the farm co-op to slow the bleed, which put her in front of half the county often enough for half the county to enjoy itself. Del Hoback came through most Saturdays and never once let it pass. "How's the ski lodge?" he'd call across the parts counter, loud enough for the whole line. Mule find you any more gold up there yet? One Saturday, a tall old man in a wool mackinaw paid for his chainsaw file, waited out Dell, and told her quietly that he did not see the sense in it either. Everett Cade had been the county surface mine inspector for 22 years before he retired, and his word on that mountain carried a weight that never needed raising. They sealed the Cavett Drift for cause, young lady, he said. That mountain slid in 1931, and it killed men. And the wisest thing this county ever did was close that grade and let the trees take it back. It was not spoken to wound. It was worse than that. It was reasonable, and the whole parts line nodded along with it. Meanwhile, the mule kept her appointments. Every morning between the first grey and the full sun, Juniper walked out onto the grade and set her blind face against the same 4 feet of rock cut, and every morning Nora stood at the near end of the road with her coffee going cold, counting morning 5, morning 7, morning 10, the one after 2 days of blowing snow, when Nora waded up the drifted grade to drag her in and ended up sitting down in the snow beside her instead. Both of them rhymed white, and felt, or thought she felt, a faint, warm breath of air coming out of the rock cut, softer and stiller than the wind cutting past a foot away. She told herself it was nothing. Old mountains breathe out of every crack in a cold snap. Still, the vet call she had been putting off got made that afternoon, because a blind old mule who climbs a snowed in mountain road alone to lean her face on stone is an animal somebody ought to have looked at. Dr. Ruth Espy ran the large animal practice and did not dress up her verdicts. She checked the teeth, the clouded ruined eyes, the feet, listened to the whole story with her mouth flattening, and gave her opinion while Juniper stood with the patience of a watchman. Blind animals get fixed on ground they can't check anymore, she said. She's lost her sight and her hearing's going the same road, and a mule like this will lock onto one spot and hold it, because holding it is the one job she still trusts her own body to do. It's a compulsion, and on an iced-over mountain grade, it's going to put her over the edge some morning and break her neck. Keep her off that road. Give her a fence corner down in the flat where she can't fall. $110 to hear that her mule was coming apart and her mountain was going to kill her. She tried to take the advice exactly one time. The next dawn, she tied Juniper on a long lead to the trailer axle before the sky turned, and went in and made herself not look and could not manage it. The mule did not fight the rope and did not bray. She walked to the end of the lead, faced up the grade, and stood there for 3 hours, one forefoot lifted off the frozen mud, her whole blind, ruined face aimed at a rock cut she could not reach, standing her watch at the end of a tether. Nora untied her at 8 and never tied the lead again. She told herself she was only humouring a confused old animal. What she was really doing was starting to trust her partner over the diagnosis, because one thing in it would not lie down. Compulsive animals come apart in the evening, when the light drains off and the cold comes down and the world closes in. Every article and every forum and Dr. Espy herself said the fixation always worsens at dusk. Juniper had never once set that stone at dusk. At dusk she was asleep on her feet by the stove wall. Whatever pulled her up onto that grade kept the exact opposite hours from the sickness, and it kept them to the hour, and in 23 years of diagnosing dead iron by the sound and the feel of it, Nora had learnt one law she trusted over any book, that a thing which happens on a schedule has a cause behind it. She started running it like the mechanic she still was. What was different about that rock cut at dawn, and only at dawn? Light and temperature, and the way a mountain lets go its held breath the hour the night chill breaks. On a still hard morning in the second week of December, with the snow squeaking underfoot, she went up the grade behind the mule, knelt at the rock cut, and watched the stone instead of the animal. and she found it. Where the tight-fitted course met the rough, dry-laid rock, a thin curl of vapour threaded up out of a joint and rose against the cold stone, faintly warm, separate from the wind, coming out under a steady push, a slow, constant exhale that did not gust with the weather but held its own line, hour after hour, as if something behind that wall were breathing it out. She fetched a candle and held the flame to the joint and watched it lean and gutter, drawn sideways by air moving out of the mountain, warmer than the morning, tasting faintly of coal damp and old timber and iron, mine air, threading out of a wall that a careful man had built across the mouth of something. All night, the deep cold pressed the flow down flat. When the first sun warmed the face of the rock, cut the mountain gave up its held breath for an hour and pushed its warm dead air up out of the joint, every still dawn for 94 years, with nobody standing on the grade at the right hour to notice it, because nobody walked that dead road anymore. Nobody who read machines and mountains for a living anyway. She got a cold chisel and a lamp and went over the tight course on her knees at the next low light. Every stone in that fitted wall was set in grey lime mortar, weathered soft, crumbling under a thumbnail. Every stone but one. Under a skin of moss and coal dust, the centre block was pointed not in lime, but in a hard black mortar that turned the edge of the chisel, and its face had been scored. Long ago and on purpose, with a single shallow line that a passing eye would take for a natural seam, and that a stone man would know at once for a mark. Lime is how you close a wall you are done with. Hard mortar and a scribe line are how you seal a thing you mean to come back and open. She sat back on her heels with her heart going hard and did the arithmetic of it. 90-odd years of a dead mine, and one stone in one wall that a man had sealed the careful way and never once come back for. Juniper lay down against Nora's side, blind face resting on the scored block, and let out a long, slow breath. It was a Wednesday. Nora decided the stone would come out Saturday, at dawn, in the 1 hour the mountain breathed, because the find belonged to the mule, and the mule would be on watch when it opened. If you have ever been the only one who believed a blind old animal, stay up on that grade with them. And if you want to hear what 94 years of silence sounds like the moment it finally breaks open, this is the time to subscribe, because the stone Nora pulled that Saturday changed 6 lives, and one of them belonged to a man who had been dead since 1944. Saturday broke clear and bitter, with the snow crusted hard enough to walk on, and the wind laid down at last. Nora carried up a lamp, a mash hammer, 2 chisels, and a wrecking bar, and Juniper walked ahead of her onto the grade and took her stone, and for once Nora was on time for the appointment. She worked the black mortar out of the joints by lamplight while the sky went from ink to iron, and the hard stuff came away in flakes and chips, not powder, laid by a man who understood that lime would never hold back a mountain. 3 sides gave over an hour. The 4th fought her until the sun broke against the crusted snow, and the warm breath quickened under her hands, and Juniper got to her feet and pushed her muzzle to the seam. She set the wrecking bar and threw her weight on it, and the centre stone slid out of the wall a grinding inch at a time, and the 94 sealed years came out with it, an air of coal damp and old candle tallow and cold iron, and the mule shoved her long grey face into the gap before the block was even clear. Behind it, someone had walled off a small dry room, a niche cut and corbelled back into solid rock the size of a wardrobe, floored and slope-roofed so no seep could ever stand in it, a stone man's work, tight and dry as a strongbox. Inside, up on a shelf of slate, sat an iron powder can with a soldered lid, and, beside it, a leather satchel gone stiff and dark with the years. Nora hauled them out onto the road with numb hands, sat back against the rock cut, and opened another man's hole-locked silence. The satchel held a stack of oilcloth-wrapped notebooks, canvas, bound, lettered by the year, 1926 through 1931. A folder of onion skin carbons, the ghost copies of typed letters, a flat tin of glass plate negatives, dozens, each in a numbered sleeve, a roll of mine survey maps on linen, the ink still black, and laid square on top of it all, a heavy waxed envelope, its face crossed in a firm blunt pencil hand with a line that stood the hair up on Nora's arms in the cold. For whoever the mountain sends. She read the letter with the mule's chin resting heavy on her knee. My name is Harlan Voss, it began, and I was fire boss on the Cavett section of the Ironwood mine from 1919 until they turned me out, and my mule, Old Pomp, worked this grade with me the last 12 of those years. He is under the flat rock on the point below, and his bit is in the powder can with the rest of what I could not carry down the mountain, and would not throw away. Whoever you are, you have found the record of the Cavett foal, and I mean to set it down plainly, because plain is the one way no man in this county would ever let me say it. In the autumn of 1931, I told the mine superintendent and the state both that the roof over the Cavett main was working, that the top was taking weight it had never taken, and the props were splitting green, and that the whole section wanted timbering before another man went in under it. I brought them my roof measures and my gas books to prove the mountain was moving. The superintendent, a young engineer sent up from the company with clean hands, told me a fire boss was not a mining engineer and that the Cavett top had held since 1890 and would hold a while yet. And he wrote in his book that the fire boss on the Cavett section was, and here is the word he chose, timid. On the morning of the 10th of October, I refused to pass my men into the Cavett main, and I set my mule across the mouth of the grade and would not fire the round that would have opened the new cut, and they called me off the job for it before noon. That same night, the Cavett top came down its whole length in the dark and closed the main from the face to the last crosscut, and it was only the grace of God and one stubborn fire boss that no living man was under it when it fell. The inquiry did not want to know how a fall was foreseen. It wanted to know why the fire boss had abandoned his post and refused a lawful order, and the company's own book, which lived in the company's own office, showed no roof report from me that autumn, only a note that the fire boss had walked off the Cavett section in a funk. I took my roof measures to the hearing, and a man in a good suit looked at them for less than a minute and told me the official record was complete. They sealed the drift the next year, safer to close it than to timber it and admit why, and they wrote in the file that the fire boss was unreliable, and the county has told it that way ever since, that Harlan Voss lost his nerve and got a section shut and 40 men laid off over a fear he could not prove. Here is the thing they do not know. Every roof measure I took, I copied into my weekly gas and safety report to the State Mine Bureau at the county seat, because the state filed by the year and read what the company never wanted read, and I put the Cavett top in that report every week from the 1st of September, in plain figures, right alongside the fire dam. If you have a fairer year than mine, find the received copy of my September reports to the State Mine Bureau for 1931. They have said this whole time that no one could have known the top was going. The plates in the tin are the Cavett main and the working top and the split green props, taken with my own camera the week before it fell. The powder can hold Old Pomp's bit, and coin I saved out of 25 years of a fire boss's wages and never found a use for on a mountain nobody would hire me on again, and I would sooner put it in the hand of a stranger than leave it to a company that called me a coward. Watch the dawn for me, whoever you are. The mountain breathes at first sun through the old return, up past this wall. Old Pomp used to set his face against this stone every daybreak, and I never rightly knew what he took in through it, and I built his hiding place here on purpose, so some part of him would always stand the watch. The last line of the letter was a single short sentence, and Nora read it 4 times with her breath clouding over the pencil, and did not yet know she would one day read it out loud to a room full of people who had spent 94 years telling this story wrong. She did not go down to the valley that day or the next. She photographed every page where it lay before she lifted a single one, then read 2 of the notebooks by lamplight with her supper going cold, and what was in them was not the raving of a coward. It was competence, page after page of it. Roof measure at the face, at the last crosscut, morning and shift. Props set, props split, timber drawn. Fire damp in the returns, years of it, in a small blunt hand, right up to the autumn the entries change. The pages for September of 1931 were filled in the same steady hand as every page before. No panic anywhere. Only the numbers climbing where roof numbers should never climb. 1st of September, Cavett top down 3/8 over the main. No shot fired. 12th of September, down 7/8. 2 props split green, reported to super, reported to bureau. 26th of September, down 1.5 inches, top working and talking. Reported. Then the 10th of October, and below the shift's measures. In the evening line where 12 years of pages had logged the weather and the state of his old mule, there were only 5 words. Top fell at midnight. Pomp quiet. Juniper slept until 9 the next morning, laid out flat on her side in a bar of thin cold sun on the flat, off her watch for the first time since the snow came, and Nora sat above her with a dead man's gas book open on her knees, and no notion yet how hard a county was going to take to being wrong. On Monday, she called the County Historical Society and asked what they held on the Cavett Foal, and the man who answered, a dry, careful fellow named Curtis Ambergy, went quiet a moment and then said, "Everyone up this valley knows the Cavett Foal." "Why?" Nora said the name Harlan Voss, and the line went quiet again, and Curtis said, choosing his words, that people in that hollow still said a man had vossed it when they meant a man who lost his nerve under pressure. "Then you had better drive up here," Nora said. "Wear boots." He came the next afternoon, walked the grade complaining about the drop off the shoulder, and stood over the notebooks on the cabin table for an hour without once sitting down. His hands were steady on the gas books and stopped being steady on the letter. "Do you understand what a copy to the State Bureau means?" he said at last. "It means a record that never went through the company's office. If the received copy is still in that file, this is not a story anymore, it is a correction, and corrections leave paper." 2 weeks and 5 telephone calls later, they were in the State Archive down in the Capitol, threading a reel of received bureau reports through a reader in a cold room that smelled of vinegar and old film, until the frame came up and neither of them said a word. Ironwood, Colliery, Cavett section, week ending the 5th of September, 1931. Received and stamped. Air, gas, and in the remarks column, in a clerk's typed hand off the fireboss's own report, Cavett main top, working 3/8 over the face, 2 props split, timbering advised, per fireboss H. Voss, 94 years in the dark, and it still agreed with him to the 1/8 of an inch. There was one man in the valley who had to see it before it went a step further, and Nora owed him nothing, and drove to him anyway. Everett Cade met her on his porch with a mug in his fist, and listened with an inspector's patience, and when she said Cavett and Voss his face closed like a door. "My father was a shift foreman under that superintendent," he said. "I grew up on the story of the fireboss who lost his nerve and cost 40 men their pay. I have told it myself for training." She did not argue with him. She laid the copies out along his porch rail, the gas book page, the letter, the bureau print with its received stamp, and stood in the cold while he read, and watched 3 generations of certainty bend under one autumn of roof measures. He put it in writing 5 weeks before that top ever came down, Everett said at last, mostly to himself, and he put it where the company could not lose it. To his lasting credit, he reached for no excuse. Where did this come from? Out of the wall by the old return, Mr. Cade, Nora said. My mule found it. The Historical Society called its winter meeting for the last Friday in January at the fire hall down in the valley, and word had gone around enough to fill the folding chairs and pack the back wall, co-op regulars, 2 men from the county, a stringer for the valley paper, Ray in the second row with his hat in his hands, Del Hoback by the coat rack, pretending he had only stepped in out of the wind. Curtis laid the whole of it out, the tack sail, the stone, the walled room, the bureau reel, Harlan's own glass plates thrown up big on the wall, the working top, the split green props a week before it fell. Then Everett Cade stood up with a carbine in his hand, and the room went quiet as a church. I have called the fire boss on the Cavett section a coward the better part of my life, he said, and handed that story down as a lesson in nerve. He reported that top working 5 weeks before it came down, in writing, to 2 officers, and one of them kept the paper. The record was wrong, and the record was the one my family trusted, and I was wrong every time I passed it along, and I will not soften that by one word. He sat down. Del Hoback did not quite get up, but his voice carried fine from the coat rack. I bid on that place for the poplar, he said. Told this woman on the courthouse steps she'd bought a leaky roof and a road to a hole in the ground, and most of you heard me say a good deal worse than that at the co-op. Best $4,000 anybody in this county ever laid down, and it eats at me it wasn't mine, and I earned every bite of it eating. Dr. Espy stood near the aisle with her arms folded. I charged her $110 in December, she said, to call that mule broken in the head and order her off the mountain. That animal was not coming apart. That animal was standing a watch. My refund is already written, and I would take it as a favour if you all forgot I used the word compulsion. Then Nora, who hated the front of a room worse than cold water, read them the end of Harlan's letter with Juniper's lead looped over her wrist, and gave the room the last line under the pencil, the sentence the mountain had kept all this time. They did not name me a coward for being wrong. They named me a coward for being right too soon, and a man who is right before his time will always look afraid to the men who are late. Nobody clapped for a moment, which was better than clapping. In March, the state was shamed into the thing that officers do last of all. It corrected the record. An addendum went into the Cavetful file with Harlan's carbons attached. The line about the timid fire boss struck through. The roof warning credited to H. Voss, fire boss, Cavett section, dated the 5th of September. The company superintendent with the clean hands had died in 1966 with a mine safety award to his name. The award kept his name. The file stopped lying. Curtis traced Harlan to a boarding house 2 counties over, 13 years sharpening other men's saws after they turned him out of the mines for good. No wife, no children, gone in the winter of 1944, and Everett Cade drove up himself that spring and set a wreath on a sawyer's plain flat stone. In May, the county bolted a bronze plate to the cabin wall beside the scored stone, his name, his 25 years on the Cavett section, and one line under it. He called the top 5 weeks early. As for the powder can, the sale card had read all appurtenances and contents, and Del Hoback himself offered to swear to it. A coin man down in the Capitol weighed out a handful of gold pieces, a sock, of old silver dollars and a twist of gold that Harlan had panned Sundays out of the mountain creek, and wrote a check for $22,000, and a collector took the glass plates and the survey linens for $5,000 more. It paid the back taxes, put a standing seam roof on the cabin, and ended the co-op shifts for good. The notebooks and carbons and plates went to the archive under Harlan's name, given freely. Old Pomp's bit stayed, rubbed bright again on a peg by the cabin door where the first light finds the worn iron. In June, the State Mine Bureau signed an agreement it had not offered a soul in 50 years, a volunteer weather and slide watch station at the head of the Cavett Grade, and Nora keyed a radio to the same bureau Harlan had reported to for a dozen years. Cavett Grade Station. In service. A pause, and then a young dispatcher came back through the static. "Copy Cavett Grade," he said. "Welcome back on the mountain." Verl Sauder rode out in July to see the plate and found Juniper up on the grade, blind face set against the keystone, her ruined eyes turned toward the bright morning she could not see. "Told you," he said. "She never quit a thing she set on. She just found herself a colder post to stand it on." Ray came up one Sunday with a covered dish and stood on the grade a long while, looking at the bronze plate, the mountain going gold behind it, his sister-in-law's name on a bureau agreement tacked over the cabin desk beside a photograph of Alan. "I called this a road to a hole in the ground," he said. "I've been wrong about which end of it was the hole. That's the apology, Nora. Don't you make me shine it up." Nora did not make him shine it up. Some doubters bring a covered dish, and that is concession enough. If a blind old mule, holding her post through a month of frozen dawns, put a knot in your throat, tell her so. Before you go, settle the one question this story cannot settle for itself. Some will say Juniper felt the warm, dead breath of the mountain sighing out of that old return at sunup, coal, damp, and iron, pushing up through the joint the 1 hour a day it quickened. Others will say a working animal knows an unfinished watch when she is standing on one, and that old Pomp's post got handed down the line, mule to mule, the honest way. Air or duty, tell me which one you believe down in the comments. And come back for the next story, because the survey linens showed a second sealed niche up at the Cavett air shaft. The county says that parcel goes to the tax sale come spring, and there is a coffee can on Nora's windowsill that has never once held coffee. Right where you are watching from tonight, this channel keeps its own logbook and reads every line. These mornings, the mountain still breathes at first sun, and the light comes over the ridge onto old stone and new iron, steam rising off a mug on the sill, and a blind old mule stands easy on the Cavett Grade above the sealed drift, her long grey face resting on the keystone that kept its promise.